Dreamy crickets. We're just going along, dreaming along in a little boat. What's that noise? Oh, it's the falls ahead. Don't worry about it. We're dreamy crickets. Coming the fall, folks, in a lot of ways. And I can't have any other thought in my mind, it seems, than to continue to tell you the condition that we're in has to be changed by us. And we have every ability to do so. It's going to take evolutionary engagement, though, as I keep saying, I posted on my blogcaster page. We can't do this the way we have thought about it. We can't really do it the way it was done in the past, in a way, at least without invoking a big question mark. I speak specifically here about the Second Amendment. War is not something you enter into and decide lightly. If you're smart, you're going to enter into it when you know you've won. And so I've adopted that as well into the legal civil war that they've given us, which is in the courts, so-called. And, the game is stacked, but I've told you that, okay, that takes us stepping back and being interested in our own cause, interested in the thing that we see wrong that we want to make right, and say, okay, this is what's before us. And so we're going to have to utilize that despite the obstacles that's been set in place to keep the control. And just as I go through this, and it wasn't even in my mind to say, but just by saying that, the definition of occupied territory just pops right in my mind. It's not something to disregard. And so then you have to look at what that is. And a lot of people may or may not. They may agree with me, and maybe that's the end of the thought, or maybe people won't agree with me and don't think any further. For someone like myself that's attempting to do what we do, we're doing what we do and attempting to do more, an opinion contrary to what I see and how I see it it doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is I know that we're making the steps and the strides to get to a place where the objective basis did bring peace and settlement to people, not as a movement, as the internal development that we would like for ourselves, exampled in the world around us. And we certainly look around and we don't see that. So we're so far away at some level. It looks like it's so far away to get peace and settlement that we don't really, a lot of us, I guess, give up. And I've told you there's a limit to what I can do, so at that part I can't do all that, so I have to give that up. So we all have our decisions to make, but to do really hardly anything, or to not find even a thing that you want to write a letter against, for as frivolous as you think it might be, and then persist on that point. Because if you do it right, they can't answer. And now you kind of got them in the throat hold. You got them by the neck, so to speak, and it makes the whole thing's a lot easier. So, and to address a little bit of that, if Ron Stevens is listening or will listen or get a message to him, I heard him talk on his broadcast on UCY TV about including the attorneys and such, I guess up in Canada. I would ask you to look very carefully at that. There's a special way to approach that. And so you can do it. I've said to do it. I said you go after them by taking them out. That is true, but there's a way to set that up so that you give yourself the right. You take away their ability to actually answer. And just in a nutshell, without explaining it more, you have to find the wrong that they're consistently doing. The wrong that they're doing consistently. You have to do a preliminary contact with somebody as a member. And find the thing that they don't want to talk about, that is a violation. Get them to not respond. Send a cease and desist. That cease and desist that they don't respond is not only a default, it's their acquiescence to the condition that you claim has been going on. That you now also prove that they are not unwilling to change. Now you've got them in all the facets you need to do to create the cause by which you bring them in as a body of people. Now their whole organization comes in. Whether that be the judges and stuff, you got to look very careful at the organization of your judiciary, because if they made a split, you're going to have to bridge that as well. But that's how you bring those in. You just don't bring them just to throw them in because they're the ones causing the problem. You have to tie them to the harm that the cause that they're doing, violation of law, and then the harm that it's causing. And then if you do it as we did it in an injunction, you're not going after money. You're going after them to stop the violation. If you can get that done, then now you got a real quick, it's only like, I don't know about Canada, but it's real quick in the United States of America. Those last about 15 days, those injunctions. So what they do is they get you to answer and extend and extend and extend. And I see lawyers doing that all the time. They don't actually go after the finiteness of that remedy. So, set yourself up properly. Don't just throw these people in and I'm talking to everybody now. Don't just throw somebody in because it's you hear me say to do it. There's a very particular setup. You have to really look at what's going on. You really have to assess the battlefield and how you're going to go out after and go after the battle with these people. Then you have to understand process. So once they get in, and if you've done that and you've set them up and you got them as the whole association and its members, John and Jane Doe's, X to question mark, whatever the heck, however you want to designate all their members. Then when you get into the court, you see the clerk the rules are being followed by the clerk that are created by the bar, that the clerk will be advised to do certain things. You have to be very careful on if you've sued the attorneys, and that includes the judges, even if they're not participating but still member of the organization you've sued, you have to do a quo warranto to demand the right to have the clerk assign the case to a judge that is party to the case. You have to get that on the record. So it's not just an automatic thing, and it's not a battle. It's a matter of looking at the battlefield and figuring out what they're going to probably do. Now, in our case, in the United States, I know that the federal courts have a problem, and we had that all. I had all that researched out a long time, but it's never had a real cause and an understanding up until we did. About how to execute the problem. The problem is for the federal courts is they're Article 1 courts or Article 4 courts. And so that's not for our case. When you look at the jurisdictional requirements for what we sued on, and this is what you have to do up there, or anywhere actually, any country, you have to make sure that the special court is invoked. You do that with the petition, but that the clerk follows to invoke a judge into that court that has competency. And when you see they don't, you then have to go after the clerk and the receiving judge with a quo warranto. And so you call them both out for the warrant in law they have to send the case to an incompetent court and the incompetent court to receive it. And this all happens within a few days, so you have to be ready to go. You have to understand this. So I'm going to caution you a little bit. I think it's a great plan, but it comes with some execution that has to be done pretty correctly. So anyway, that's what I'll say there. Just to caution you, not to say don't do it. I'm saying do it. You have to go right at if you said, sue Satan. That's exactly who you have to go after. And you have to get at them correct so that everybody witnessing, and this is more the key than the rule, make sure that when you do it, everybody witnessing sees that, clarity. You have to do it in a clear manner. So, to give you an example, and I don't have any paperwork because they're blocking it, but if you get over to JeffersonMiningDistrict.com versus Kitzhaber, Kitzhaber, in 2013, just search that on the internet, go to the Justia link, go down to the docket if it's still available, and I think that's still available. Look at what the filings were on our case. You won't see the filings, but you'll see what was filing in the docket. And if you understand what I've just said, what we did, and you should correlate that to what you may have to be prepared to do. It's anybody, not just Ron, but anybody. It's not a set pattern because I don't know how anybody would do their case, but it is a thing you have to anticipate ahead. You're not looking behind and you can't wait. This is a 15-day process. Things happen in a couple days. You have to be responsive to that, what goes on and what doesn't go on. And it comes really quickly if you do the injunctive remedy. And I would suggest maybe to do that because it is really short. You can fire those things off all the time and even if you need practice. In fact, if you need practice, I wouldn't do the most important decisions first. I would kind of touch the light stuff first. But so you send a communication, you get the fact that they're not going to answer, you send a cease and desist. When they don't, you've qualified that they don't intend to stop violating you, and that is essentially a prima facie case of violation. So you go walk into the court with a win. And if they do answer, you use that cease and desist to say, no, they've agreed that they weren't going to follow it. So are they now going to agree that they should follow it? Or are they going to continue to make a felony under the color of their authority to say that they can fight you? And so this is where you bring up the dimensions. The dimensions of the attack are built in before you get going. This has to be thought out, the way to approach this. And I think it's valiant what you're going to attempt to do. You can do it. It has to just look at the details on the real the real thing that goes on here, not our ideas of what's going to go on. And so I think I'll stop there. There's enough information to be talking about. There is a lot more behind this, but it is it's just an understanding. It's a foundation we all need to have. We should have never not had this foundation. The decisions I made, the choices I made, apparently put me on a path to be able to find and see. And I mean, in a way, you got to understand. I really am the little guy that just expected the world to be what I was told, and I got insulted. I said we're all walking in the wound. We're coming from a wound. It's the insult against us. It wasn't what they said. Now the reality is that people are out there to lie and for profit and for plunder, and that takes a while to overcome. And I was interested to figure out what happened there, and maybe if it was a crime against me, I'm going to try and stop it. And so that's really all the basics. It's not that technically. I mean, I've had to go quite a ways to go find all this stuff that seems to reoccur, and I hope you're hearing the consistency through my broadcasts about all that. I mean, it's just there's nothing. I'm not saying nothing I haven't that I haven't been researching. It's not like the new thing I just found to tell you all. No, this is so old. It's not even. It's not a question. Why it still is a question for us is really why I wonder. I wonder about us. So we have to have the foundation of what we're going to do, even though it was created by somebody else under the ostensible reason of doing justice. You identify its injustice, and they done it, and now you got them. Now you start to get them a lot better than just having an opinion. And I've said you get them to agree. You do that by writing them a letter and putting a demand. I mean, I can go on. I'll just go on and on how you do a lot of this, and it's not all. There's no roadmap, any particular roadmap. It's what it takes to bring about the elements that you need. It's the only thing I've found, and a lot of people will say, but you're going in to get an answer from the system that's corrupting you, that's corrupted the world around you. I said, no, you're going in to show that they've been the obstruction, and they can't provide justice. It's a fraud on everybody. Those similarly situated. See, all the words keep coming back. It's gonna be really consistent. As long as I'm consistent, and I check for that as I'm talking, real time, nothing prepared. I'm not reading from anything. In fact, I'm looking at a little plastic ring I'm picking it up now, so you know that behind the scenes, behind the woodshed, behind the scenes, I got this little ring now. A plastic ring I'm looking at while I'm talking to you. Wonder where the heck did that come from? But at any rate, there's nothing in my mind that's prepared necessarily. I'm responding to what we've done, what I've read, what I've done, what has happened, where we have to go, the anticipations of where we're going, and I just try to bring that to you because I want you all to know. I want you all just to know because we should have never not known, and the fact that you don't know is self-evident proof that there's something out there, whatever you want to put a name on it, there's some condition out there that has set you up for the fall that you're living in the stinking abyss. And, we get to these little documents like the Silent Weapons, Quiet Wars that will explain this in an odd way. Yeah, it kind of gets it puts us all in another place thing most people don't understand, electronics. But if you know what they're saying in there, if you can just kind of pour through that little conundrum of how they obscured the truth in there enough that if you don't see that they're just really making a place in the society they have, the future we want is their want, is what they've wanted to put them in power to plunder and keep you underneath the servitude. When you realize they've made a place for you to plug in, then you start looking for every places to not plug in, and or if you find yourself there, if you can, you try to extricate yourself. And everyone has to make that decision. Although I have caution against excuse. You can't just say, oh, I don't want to do it because I got, because I make up an excuse. You will either be part of it by being plugged in or not. And that's the only choice you really have. You either go the right way or you're going to go the wrong way. You either go the right way or you're going to go the way they have planned for you, no matter how independent your mind is independent, how non-dependent you think you is. You're going down the path that's been created, and you're just going to kind of go through. And a lot of conversation I see kind of hints to me that we're just going to kind of sneak on by. Oh, we'll wave the flag of freedom, so called, but we're not really going to lift a finger to change that. We're not going to do the things it actually takes. We'll just complain that we're in it instead of actually engaging it. So, again, I mean, I have no judgment on anybody that jumps in, and even if you get beat up a bit, if that's what the learning process is, I haven't gone through unscathed for sure, but I didn't make it a repeat offense, I'll tell you. And that's what when you get out a little bit, you don't go back and keep banging your head against the same wall. You figure, okay, well, I didn't realize that was there. I didn't realize they were that vicious. Because you always want to, for some reason, we always want to give the benefit of the doubt. Folks, there's no doubt. Jefferson Mining District versus Kitzhopper. I'm telling you, not as Jefferson Mining District. I was one of the parties, and if I can call myself a party, but they call you that, a party to the case. I'm a default judgment holder in this case. I'm not some third party looking into the case. The Jefferson Mining District Assembly, the people that make up the assembly, the actual governments of this United States government, of this nation, the actual governments were mining districts. They rallied up themselves to protect themselves from invasion and to bring peace amongst themselves. They really are the example of the most basic foundational way that government ought to work and did work. So much so that Congress adopted it better than the way Congress could create when it made the mining law. And so the mining law, we were talking about quick, and I didn't have much time to converse this weekend, but talking about what law would you think is a good law, and I put in the mining law. Didn't put an answer, and I don't know, I didn't have a chance to go back and see if anybody responded, but for me, the mining law is very important. It has explained more than I think anything in analyzing it and working with it. It has explained to me things that I would have never, ever, ever seen. I've never, ever, ever seen written anywhere or talked about or brought into schools or found by people. And it was a really big eye-opener for me. I'm using that law. I'm using the principles under it to actually go back and grab all the stuff that they've been trying to tell us doesn't work and is wrongly used by other people. So that's just why I think it was important. It's really just an old memory of what was done right, and notwithstanding the context of other things that maybe a philosophical condition we could talk about, but there's a reality behind all the underlying things, however right or wrong it was done. And to me, it just shows how wrong people are, so-called humans are to each other. This is at this point, the best we had in the mining law. Although it wasn't completely perfect, it certainly gave me the idea of how we do this stuff that they haven't told us we should do, and we didn't need government. In fact, government became obligatory. And we have now insights about all of that. In fact, if I can get, then I better get to it. Very important problem happened in California for all you property owners and you miners. It's very, very serious what they've been doing, and they brought the agenda on us, and they made it official. I mean, Supreme Court. So I'm going to keep moving here. So when they get you to plug in, where I was going with that, plugging in the electronics and all that, just want to give you a quick warning. Those of you with the iOS software in your iPhone, update your software. Apparently there's at least 3 zero-day zero-day exploits. 0 day means that they never knew about them before. There were no days before that they've been exploited. And so some company was using those exploits and just happened to tell you about them, tell Apple, and Apple's plugged those up. If you use an iPhone, iPad, or iPod Touch, you got to get this update, because you're what we thought about Apple and being foolproof is no longer reality, if it ever was. And it's just showing you all the things that you're vulnerable to when you get and plug yourself into this Internet of Things. Okay, so again, they're a valuable tool. Without it, I couldn't talk to you. Without this Internet of Things, I couldn't talk with you. But there's also exploits that take us on in ways that it may not be apparent to us today, but you want to talk about those future generations and those ones they're trying to get rid of. The ones that remain, they're going to be totally onto this, and it would have been up to you. You would have let that, whether you made it by excuse or inability to properly act, or just ran out of life while you were properly acting. And that's what I tell guys I work with. They're just waiting for us to die. And so this is you're on a time schedule. Corporations are the undead. They're not. So there's another imperative, self-evident imperative. So update is a theme here in the beginning of the broadcast. Update your iOS software. Understand there's exploits. They told us about 3. The company was willing to use them until it decided, and I don't know what the impetus was to tell Apple to fix them, but that certainly what are they holding back came to my mind. So keep yourself plugged into this stuff, and there will be exploitations against you. And I want you to remember that as we move into this time when they're denouncing money and denouncing cash and moving into international and digital things for what you might call currency and or connections or requirements. In other words, you can't get. I know I've heard you can't even deal with the state in the states and their benefits anymore unless you have an internet hookup. Now, the United States didn't guarantee a hookup, so that's your out, so they have to give that out. But when they make mandatory, the reason why they make mandatory everybody has to have it is because you're going to be moved on into the next servitude. That's how that works. So update your iOS just to keep people from being hacking and causing your life misery. That's really all it is. It's somebody come in, and may not even be the government, just someone who's out there has nothing better to do in their life but to mess with yours. But you keep plugged into this digital world, and you're going to be messed with. As I said, it's way beyond what I've ever thought to deal with in a day. On top of everything else I would deal with. And so it's a word to the wise here. I don't want to get so deep on that, but update. So we have another update on an interesting thing, kind of partial to another life when I looked at a lot of this stuff. And I told you a long time ago, watching, I had identified a bunch of faults in an area that I lived, that geological faults that none of the government knew about. I was watching very carefully at the time. It's just out of the newspaper. You're looking for certain things. I kept a mental note of what was going on. I got to the point that I could sense an earthquake was going to happen. I could, if I could jump quickly into a chair and relax I could jump right into a chair. I always picked a chair that I was going to sit me in the chair and looking the direction from which the earthquake would come. And I had to practice this. I would get a sense an earthquake had happened. I'd jump in a chair, kind of like the elephants running to the mountains in Indonesia. I'd jump in a chair, jump to the chair that I was going to need to see the earthquake, the shape of the wave. And you calm yourself and you'd look, and I could see that wave. Well, doing all this, I could tell direction, distance, and all kinds of. It was really a neat thing. From that, I derived some theories, and I told you that one theory that held for about 30 or so years was abolished by the Indonesian Sumatra quake. It no longer holds up anymore. That I could predict secondary and tertiary earthquakes. I hadn't quite got to the first one, but getting to the point of the scientists would only tell you what they wanted to tell you and what the theories of their consensus, and I learned that early on. But a lot of this stuff wasn't really backed up by a lot, and so I had my own ideas. I was always into the solar thing, and the sun isn't quite what we've been told either, and what it does. But anyway, so they have equipment that goes up there, and we had a satellite, pretty interesting stuff. We lost the contact with the satellite for some reason. It was called Stereo Behind. I guess the Woodshed would be a neat addition, but no, Stereo Behind, Stereo B. And after 22 months of being lost, initially being hidden behind the sun from our vantage point, they unexpectedly got contact of this thing. And so the update is going on. It's kind of neat to watch. They had this little satellite in space giving us a lot of information about the sun, being able to look at the thing, and actually helped us to start to see things that the scientists are still denying, but is there. So I've always been interested in this thing, and this would be the other life I would live. I keep one eye on this, but I thought it was very interesting to tell you about in this update section here. We did gain information about a very useful tool about looking at the sun, and it was on August 21st, a contact was reestablished with the Stereo Behind Air spacecraft for the first time in 22 months since contact was lost on October 1st, 2014. I'll have a website link for all this. You can see the updates yourself. During the monthly recovery operations, the Deep Space Network Station DSS-14 established lock on the Stereo Behind downlink carrier, and so they finally were able to work out all this thing. I won't read it more. You can find this out. No telemetry was received, as is expected, since the avionics were purposely powered off to maintain battery state of charge after the initial contact. So now they've got a emergency condition where the satellite down, now they can revive this thing. So it's been real interesting to watch. What I got a kick out of, and here we get into the jargon of about these things that scientists apparently want to make themselves sound really important and knowledgeable regarding the attitude of this spacecraft. And again, I was looking at this more to the point of the experts speak in funny ways, and they try to make what they're doing a whole lot more important by this special jargon. And sometimes it's required because it's a special field that requires a special language. I want to point out and remind you the special language of legal is just like that. And so we have evidences of these little things. But what's funny to me was what they said here. The way they said something is pretty interesting. And I just got cracked up about it, how they try to make it real important and make it kind of mysterious what they do. I think it's fantastic what they're doing as far as out in the middle of space around this little device out around the sun. They lost it, first of all, so they're not that adept. But they did capture it back, and they're now getting little bits of information, and they're now communicating and all kinds of things. And this thing's pretty fascinating. You listen to the dynamics of space. The hydrogen is all hydrazine in the machine's all frozen up. But anyway, so they have a problem now. They found out that the attitude and the motion of this is not quite right. Over all this time, it's been lost. This description was the 2 minute. There's a roughly 2 minute rotation wobble, is roughly 3 degrees per second, which is beyond what the moment wheels can handle. The moment wheels are probably the positioners, the gyro positioners. That motion is a little bit more than what that can handle. Then they make this statement. This means that any attempt to de-spin the spacecraft at the present time would result in saturation and subsequent autonomous momentum dump, for which the spacecraft has not yet been prepared. And so I don't know if you heard it, result in a saturation and subsequent autonomous momentum dump. Well, I started laughing, but I wanted to make sure. So I went to the Twitter, and I'm following Dr. Tamitha Skov, who you might want to check in on. She's a space weather woman. She talks all about the sun. It's for the ham radio. Those of you on ham, she'll give you the information on when your signal's good. You give your information on when it may not be so good. And this is important for us if we're needing to have communications in emergency times. You want to be able to keep track. She'll tell you she's actually the trained physicist in solar, the solar world, the solar subject matter. But I sent her I follow her on Twitter. I sent her a question. More of a statement question. I said, result in saturation and subsequent autonomous momentum dump. Layman's terms, does that mean stuff be flying off it? Now, she did answer, but she did favorite it. So I assume that it means all that big jargon was stuff be flying off the satellite if they don't do this just right, folks. Another thing is, you'll see that this important piece of equipment for us to look at the sun to see and anticipate things that comes from the sun that the climate scientists will deny exists as well. This is our problem. I tend to like to see what's going on because I think it's a direct connection. We have direct effect. If without it we wouldn't be here, let's put it that way. That this information that we get from the sun, I can make up my own decisions when I can see it, that this important information they're trying to put it back online. But if they don't do it right, we're going to have a saturation and subsequent autonomous momentum dump. We will have stuff be flying off it here, and that's concurred with, I suppose, with this doctor who just favorited that point. But, this is a serious type of thing. We lose all this time and energy, but here we have valuable tools that we have access to now, not just the scientists. That I'm glad they're there to do whatever they're doing in order to understand this, but that the jargon kind of blocks us from understanding exactly what might be going on there unless we can do, layman's terms adjustments. And again, relating it back to any special subject matter, we'll have these problem of so-called layman's terms adjustments that we have to be able to read through, that if you don't quite get it, you won't be understanding what you're actually looking at. And it's easy for someone to deceive you, I suppose, is the better word there. So also another guy you might want to check out is another website on YouTube, Suspicious Observers. It does a morning broadcast that explains things going on. If you want pretty real time, fairly accurate, real accurate discussion. Again, some things we don't understand, some things we may be quibbling with, but most of the time you get to see the pictures. He explains as Ben Davidson on Suspicious Observers website. He's another guy that does space weather, and I say that because it's very important. I'm not necessarily a disasterist that way. I think we're in the normal process of whatever goes on, we're here, and it's going on. But when it has the ability to affect you, and you can anticipate these things and start to understand them, it's another element of being prepared, I guess is all I can say here. And we're going to necessarily need to have a better and clearer view of what's going on than what we're told is going on. And if you listen to suspicious observers, you know they've got a real big thing going up against one of the guys in the government who just won't answer to the theory that they've found out with the scientists helping, other different type of scientists helping, that the sun can have a great, the conditions on the sun can have a great imposition on whether or not you're going to have an eight level earthquake. And he's got a disaster app they're going to do, which is kind of interesting. But again, you don't hear the government doing any of this to help predict things to keep people out of harm's way. And you understand as you listen behind the woodshed and all the other places that we'll talk about this idea that they want to depopulate the population, you realize that the people who have this knowledge may want to be a little bit, the priests may not want to tell you the secret, and they might want to let you get into harm's way. As we find out down in Louisiana, the Cajun Navy steps up to help where everybody else couldn't, and starts actually doing stuff, and so the local government require outlaws them unless you get a permission to help out. And then they use the Red Cross to be the certifier of that, and they say, well, no, you have a standard to meet. Now, I don't know about you folks, but when you're putting out a house, I don't know if there's a standard to meet if you want to just get water and dirt or shovels to the fire. I mean, you just put it out. But this is what government does. It gets in the way, and at some point we're going to have to actually understand the reality better than what we're told, and then be bold and enough to assert that against and contrary to these people in government that would rather bring this UN-style agenda, this Agenda 21. You can't do nothing for yourself unless you get it from the central authority. And so that's why I want to talk about the updates on these. Your electronics is being infiltrated for that purpose. The knowledge that you get from the technology that they say the taxpayers are paying for, yet you can't get direct information. You should be interested in what's going on, and for those of us like myself that are interested in an interaction between these planets and a different theory of organization of the universe, so to speak, it becomes pretty interesting to be looking at that and make up your own determinations. We are in a pretty stable universe, so we haven't seen, I've been kind of, like I've told you, we've been kind of disappointed that we don't see more giant meteors. So the fact that the giant meteor is running for office in the United States, that's a pretty big deal. We're in a pretty stable kind of a condition, even though people will whine about climate change. Even if it was true, folks, what are you going to do about it? And yet they're trying to do things with it against you. And so it's very important when you start seeing these daily reports or weekly or monthly reports from the space weather woman, Dr. Tamitha Skov, that she'll tell you stuff and you start getting a new insight on what it is, and she's really available. You can ask her questions. She'll talk to you. She does aurora pictures and everything else. There's a whole different insight you start to get, a lot better than what you're told. And so for me, this is what's important. We have to get, as I've told you, what they tell you is the news is the notice. You have to see this for yourself. I know repeating it may be boring to a lot of people, but apparently it's not enough that people are taking this as fact and utilizing it. You just kind of listen on, pass through, and keep going. I don't see anybody taking the information and utilizing it. Like I was telling you, within this is the tools of evidence that you would need to make a cause to go against these plunderers, these thieves, these military executioners, the execution soldiers of the military consequence. I'm just thinking, lots of things start popping through my mind to tell you. I got so much to say. It's hard. I start to feel like I have ADHD with all where my mind starts to go. I almost start shorting out a little bit. There's just so much to say that's right there for us to be able to pick up. If we would just grab it, any one of us grab that, make that important, and start pushing it. Well, you're the only one pushing it. but you are pushing it. And that information, those proofs may never have reached the psyche of people. The one more bundle of sticks that goes on the camel. And it becomes to the last, you might be the last straw that breaks that camel's back. Sorry to the camel, but you understand the metaphor. I guess it's a metaphor. At any rate, you might be that. I don't know that you will be right now, but we're getting better. We're getting more people becoming aware. It's just that we're not properly doing. As they come against us, we're not properly responding. And we're not helpless, as I've been finding out. In fact, we're told we're not helpless, but there's a reality behind that that's a lie. We're not helpless, but they make you helpless. And you fall into that helplessness. No matter how much you'll deny it, no matter how much you think your thoughts about that crime against you works, if you don't act against it, your thoughts and your opinions are essentially useless to us, to you and to me and to all of us. Mine are as well. And so it's what are you preparing yourself to do? What task have you pointed out to get done? What's your plan? You're up against people with military plans. They do this for a living. That's how far out. You ever tried to go amateur against professional? That's how bad this is. Maybe worse. And I found out that you can go from amateur and bypass professional because they're just looking at the bottom line. This is our lives, folks. This is our lives, and who's going to control it? And if you haven't made the decision that it's you, and I don't mean you as as bad autonomous despot, bully and brute like they've become, psychopath, not like that. But you're going to be in command of your own life, and you will properly respond to those that come against you. Until you do that, we're really just walking with that ring in our nose. I've told you forever, pull it out. U.S. judge upholds state law requiring vaccines. U.S. judge upholds state law requiring vaccines. Do I say it again? Do you get that, folks? U.S. judge upholds state law requiring vaccines. Do you know that heading is factually the truth of what happened, but do you know that that's correct in its surface statement about the power of the state, in its police power capacity? And this is where you have to start looking and understanding there's underlying principles about this. And police powers is about impossible to defeat once it's established. And this is what we're going to, if I get there, we'll get there here on something that's happened against the miners and the property rights owners as well in California as well. If you understand the central imposition of international order over your lives. But this is dealing in police powers, as the other case will be dealing. A federal judge refused Friday to block California's new vaccine law, which requires children in public and private schools to be inoculated against 10 contagious illnesses and eliminates an exemption based on their parents' personal beliefs. So, you know about the word parents and personal and beliefs, okay? So, that's not my point. Let's get to the point. Society, quote, society has a compelling interest in fighting the spread of contagious diseases through mandatory vaccination of school-aged children, U.S. District Judge Dana Sabra of San Diego said in denying an injunction against enforcement of the law sought by 17 parents and 4 anti-vaccine organizations. Well, just as an interruption here, notwithstanding their parents' designation and not mothers and fathers, they did an injunction. See, they can go back and fix their thing and go back at them again. It happened pretty quickly. But walking into a case where the police power for vaccines is valid at some level, and if you don't have a proper answer against it, having 4 or 8 organizations walk in on the case as parties that are anti-vaccines probably not going to get your case won. I'm just going to say it that way, without further analysis. The right of freely practice one's religion, one of the rights invoked by the opponents of the new law, does not outweigh the state's interest in public health and safety. You're dealing in police powers here, folks. You got to up your game, big time. The law was prompted by a measles outbreak in 2014 that was traced to youngsters at Disneyland who hadn't been vaccinated. implemented last month. The new measure makes California one of the 3 states along with Mississippi, West Virginia, Mississippi, to require all school children to be vaccinated against illnesses such as measles, mumps, and all that. While the law says that all children must be vaccinated, it requires parents to provide immunization records only when a student is entering kindergarten or 7th grade. That means an elementary school student with a previous parental exemption does not need vaccination. Okay, that's the details. But what the judge said here, it was that you can't circumvent what the police powers of the state will declare. But what was interesting is the judge made this statement. The family's claim of religious freedom in that case does not include liberty to expose the community or the children to communicable diseases. And I looked at that and I wondered, did the attorneys on this case even broach that problem? That in defense of their position against the police power imposition, that the police power imposition, as I've told you before, is a fraudulent pretext to impose under color of authority this mandatory condition. That the phrase does not include liberty to expose the community or the child to communicable diseases proves that vaccines do not work, notwithstanding what the manufacturers say, would trump a police power concern and place the burden back on the state to show how the vaccines did stop, or did stop, but didn't stop, but did work. Because if you have everyone else is being vaccinated, they are not susceptible to the one that would be having the wild version. So I just looked in this little stories like this. They set us up to use this stuff if we would just use it. The statement does not, the family's choice of religious freedom in that case does not include liberty to expose the community or the child to communicable disease, proves the vaccines don't work. The court recognized that. And so there's an error in the decision right here based on the improper imposition of another case by the lawyers in this case. And that doesn't even, I wondered where were these attorneys that they didn't show the findings that the ones that were vaccinated were actually the ones that sent that measles out. We haven't even talked about that problem, that the DNA of the infected non-vaccinated kids were the ones that came from the vaccinated kids, little goats. Anyway, so get to the point here. This statement to me was saying that the judge recognized that vaccines don't work because your unvaccinated little one could go to school and infect them. Infect the herd. So the other opportunity, and I've been telling you this over and over and over, and you can make it an excuse to continue the problem for yourself. But you take the benefit of the state, you're subject to its police power. Stop sending your little ones to school. I found out that you can teach everything they do in a day in school, you can probably teach them in 40 minutes. And the rest of the day it can be theirs. To do chores for sure, but, you got to have some order in their life. But everything that you're taught every day in school is about 40 minutes worth. And that was kind of a long day for what they actually teach your little ones. Which is why a long time ago when you got out of the 3rd or 4th grade, or maybe didn't make it to the 8th, you had enough in you to do stuff in the world that was sufficient. And so there's been a slow dumbing down and extension of the training period, the interference pattern influence that the state puts on your little ones is also a problem. So you can go ahead and make the excuse to keep sending them to school, but if they don't go to school, then you don't have to apparently vaccinate, right? So now you don't have to get in the middle of it. And if they make it mandatory, then move. It would be great to have watched when this decision came down, and this was a U.S. judge, it's a federal court. Well, we've talked about the problem with the federal court, U.S. D.C. court. Doesn't have jurisdiction, but that's how they decide. They decide on the agenda. That have everyone move out of California overnight. Would have been kind of a neat thing, don't you think? Last family out turns off the lights. See, we have the power in another way. I don't know how that would work, but it would just be fun to watch the people actually be responsive to this nonsense. U.S. judge upholds state law requiring vaccination. So, don't put yourself in there, or go back in and redo the injunction with a better basis, a better foundation. I'd use the judge's decision in the case about how he interpreted the prior case as explaining that vaccines don't work. The burden now is on the state to show it's not a pretext. And now you've got them for fraud if they can't. See, that's how you twist this. So I'm trying to tell you about how to think ahead of what needs to happen. You have to have the foundation of the dynamics of the burdens in these courts, as corrupt as they are. And if you do nothing more than to make the record that they're that corrupt, then it's maybe one more witness looking on, one more cricket that stops being a cricket to say, what? And I guess that's really all I'm looking at we may have left to us in the lack of organization. So another thing that comes up right about this time about the judge upholding the police power of the state to do that, without the Bar Association members, without properly addressing the police power as a pretext, or come up with anything else. I mean, there might be lots. How about the First Amendment right to be free from an association? And then the court would come back and tell you, well, then you chose to send your kid to school, and your little goat has to get vaccinated when it goes to the barnyard, play yard. And you would say, oh, okay, well, that's the law. I guess I'll just not have my son or daughter go to school, so they're not treated like the little goat and have to be vaccinated for the play yard. See, that would be the answer. I've seen court cases that said that. Again, you take the benefit, you're going to have to do what the state does to protect everyone to their benefit. But at least I've read enough stuff to know that this vaccination condition is a pretext, not a fact. And once you throw that pretext, you then have everything you've ever heard that shows that there's not been any proof that's been accurate, that there's been collusion with the government, that the immunities are done to do certain violations to people. You start laying it out. You just lay it out. And this all becomes the burden on the state to prove that it isn't using these nefarious ways to essentially commit theft by extortion under color of authorities. I've talked to you about over and over. It's really not that hard. So then there's this thing that pops up. We're talking about what the experts use, all the scientists use, the tools they use. I said, you got to be careful with the methods and the processes. Are they true? Are those been checked? All this stuff. Well, it comes out even the software programs that they use to document their work and put it out and use it ad infinitum, study after study, test after step, that everyone uses these data points stuck into an Excel program, has been found by an independent study to have shown that at least 20% of all scientific papers on genes alone were erroneous. The Microsoft product Excel is causing these problems with the way it handles data. Now, you walk into the court of law, and they're all relying on the gene, and who knows what's been involved in these gene manipulations with these vaccines, and you say, but 20% of the data is incorrect. How can you make this finding? You have another point on your side as someone who wants to stop the mass vaccination, and you show that it doesn't matter that the police power, because their answer's a felony. It wasn't the proper answer. In other words, they got knee-jerk reactions, and they want to really do another violation to people, quell the people by thinking that they're doing something, and in fact, it's harming people. Oh, guess what I just brought up? You get to bring out all the evidence of those that have been harmed. There comes the vaccine court. How about just entering into the record, folks, that what I've been telling you to read, the product insert. We got so much we could be doing that we're not, that I don't think that the bar members are doing well enough. I know that by experience. That we are going to have to take that bull by the horns. We're going to have to throw out these scoundrels, and we're going to have to start to throw out the system they've created that makes it appear to be a justice system when it's a just system just because they get along, they get away with it. They fed us with the thought that this is the best we can do. I think we can do better than a felony under color of authority, folks. I wish you would just have that in your mind and on your mouth and in your paperwork, proving it so and presenting it. Whether or not the criminal, on the other hand, that's receiving it will respond. I've told you when the clerk received our paper, she did another crime, we caught her. Yeah, but we only had 2 days, right? I mean, this stuff goes pretty quick. You have to be prepared. I was. I'd watch this happen over and over. I'd watch so many so-called patriots coming down the pike and get the same shaft. I said, wait a minute, why do they go, why is everybody going down that dumb path? Why don't they stop and learn from the mistakes of others? So that, I guess, in a nutshell, that is my path to you today, is to tell you, I've been as cognizant as I possibly could on observing the mistakes of others and working really hard not to make sure that at least those mistakes were not done. And we get a whole different response, even the non-response, which is good enough for us when you stick them in a place where they've defaulted out of agreeing to their crime that they do, the knowing intended crime and harm and willing to continue it. There's not much more you actually need, really. What you'll find is the rest of the system is all coming under the color of that. Everyone you see that will allow it become an accessory to that becomes the accessory to the felony, and that becomes that becomes those in the government. Not the government. That's just a shell. That becomes the government. And they're relying on Microsoft Excel sheets, which because of the certain type of data that puts in for genes at least, and they said it crosses different subject matter jurisdictions as well of use of Excel. 20% typos that are replicated as truth over and over in other studies is the same Excel program that your government may use and have their own special jargon discussions, the delineations over the names they want to give them, the truncated, abbreviated names, which gives Excel the problem. And so our life is given over into this dead digital field that is problematic. Garbage in, garbage out. In this case, it's quality in, garbage out. Figure that one out, folks. And that's supposed to be good enough in our life. Well, it's not. And it's up to you to start calling it out. This is why I keep telling you the courts, in their better moment, are very slow to take on evidence as a matter of law, like DNA evidence or what do you call it just slipped my mind, starts with a P, but at any rate, these evidences are not necessarily acceptable. You have to have a corollary proof to prove that what you're bringing in is an evidence. And so if you know that, these things can be used to defeat. If you found that there was any vaccine in California that was adulterated by a GMO production, you can bring this in and say, listen, we don't know that 20% of your data didn't show that it looked like it effective, and we have evidence that the judge saw that it may not be, because the judge said that someone who has measles that's not vaccinated can go and affect kids that are vaccinated. You're either pregnant or you're not, I think. Unless they've got that kind of messed around. I guess that's possible. Well, we have no proof of that, though, do we? So proving this thing is where you settle down. You make sure that everything's been proved out. I'm sure that the attorneys didn't do any of that. And so the cover-up is on. This is you just start blowing this thing up in their face. The film Vax could be outlawed in California if this bill passes, with another report by John Rappaport, California Bill AB 1671. You see these usurpers inside of the legislature, these bar members inside the legislature that make these decisions. These Republicans and Democratic Party members are all the people we sued and enjoined and said that they are destroyers of the Republic form of representative government. They interfere with property as a theft by extortion without right to do so. They use pretext in order to do that. This is where I'm pointing out about this. They use this emergencies and necessities when in fact they're pretexts. They're not provable. So you got to find the evidence that it's not, and that throws the burden over on them. But if you've sued the one that's making the decision for being a party to the decision in the beginning and the setting up of the evidence for them to adjust it to make appropriate that decision, now you've got the whole thing exposed. But in this case, where you have the California bill going to outlaw the movie Vaxxed, you see how engaged the enemy is against you. Even though, as I was said, your right to associate is being affected in their vaccines. Here, they're trying to burn the books, if you will. These people in California don't care, and it's not just California. It'll be anywhere they think they can get away with it. Remember, the ABA said where appropriate. Where appropriate ends up being what they can sneak by you. What's transparent to you is where appropriate. So understand the dynamic that's going, how big a deal this is that the government wants you vaccinated. It's all happened to be these stories coming out of California. You would think that the government would know better than to try and eliminate a piece of information. So you now see where they're going encroaching on telling you what it is that you're going to be able to know. They're willing to put this up to get it by the legislature, the judiciary, which is them. And even if it wasn't, they've learned if they put it up, the presumption is the legislature did right. And so you're lost to begin with until you flip the burden. And so the dynamic is set against us, and you have to learn that dynamic to destroy it, to interfere with it at least. But you can't do it on your opinions of that. A lot of people want to rant on their opinions. I say those rants have the elements of what you need to be saying in a more proper form, in the more proper place, not on just the YouTubes. So, an investigative reporter calls our attention that there's a state that's willing to burn the books, burn the video, burn the content, burn the information. They don't believe you're able to make your own decisions. Certainly. Oh, they certainly don't want to have unpermitted information out there. And so you're seeing the agenda. It's self-evident. It's central control. And they don't care about your laws. They don't care about your rights. They care nothing. And as long as you don't care enough, they win. So there's multiple layers and standards that go on. There's, again, a concept I keep forgetting to mention, parens patriae. You need to research that. Parens patriae. So it's the state as the father. I want to say the state's the nanny state. No, it's actually the father. This is a patriarchal imposition. And if you don't understand the foundation of these things, you'll have no way to even begin to understand what I've been saying. Why I've even come up with what I've done, where I go, what I've done, what I've thought about to tell you, what I tell you. It'll go in one ear, out the other. You'll dismiss what I'm saying. You'll make up your own adjectopias. Yeah, I said that word too. Adjectopias. I looked up these terms. I didn't make that. Okay, I made up adjectopia, but the adject, you need to go find out what these things are. These are like blood clots you found up that you actually think that are good things to do for yourself, and I don't hear hardly anybody with a foundation in them to be able to make those decisions. But they're used as a complaint. And this is just not going to work with it. I don't even have to agree or disagree. That is not going to work, period. The people who have usurped the system that seemed to look like it worked, at least by the example that I've seen could be the fact, are the problem. And you see these people, the notice, we had this Hillary Clinton thing. Remember, she got, the attorneys got together, the Comey cabal, and they gave her an out. And I explained a bit on what it looked like to me they did to give her the out, which was improper out to begin with, not even, regardless of even if you wanted her to see the inside of a courtroom over it. They went on the wrong point, in my estimation, because they didn't put the burden on her like they ought to, where they put the burden on you when you go into the court. And if you don't know what that is, you're going to lose. It's pretty simple. Like I said, if you knew what the burden was, you wouldn't get 4 anti-vax organizations to be on your injunction. Because you have to give the authority The court decision is based in authorita, but the statement terms are authority, and you have to be able to defeat that. The authorita is actionable against the wrong, the improper decision. The fact that the statement itself is self-evident, vaccines don't work, which is self-evident that the whole case should have been enjoined, because how can a vaccinated little one, or little goat, the child, the kid, be affected by someone outside if the vaccines work? That alone is a facial problem to me that's appealable. If you want to go that way, I would probably return with another case. Based on that statement, I would say that has to be killed because the judge found that vaccines do not work. And then I would bring up all the product label, because that's in there saying there's harms that can happen in the use of this product. This is not free from very serious harms, even death. So we have a multi-level issue here of accountability. There is none at the top and everything at the bottom. Pleading the Hillary, Saylor asks for leniency by citing the Clinton case. And I found this an interesting use. The attorneys are pretty good at glomming on to stuff. And they said, well, listen, if you're going to, on this national security stuff, if you're going to go the way you did with Hillary Clinton, as a sailor taking pictures of some some classified nuclear information, I want you to extend to me the Hillary leniency. Do you think the sailor got it, folks? No. A few days later, it's reported the sailor was denied the Clinton deal, gets 1 year in prison, and for 6 photos of a sub. So we see right in the news, a notice that the military will treat even the military personnel differently. It's okay for those in the groove, in the know. On the list, the preferred crew, the clique, to go ahead and get the deals, but they're not going to extend it to the peons in the military. Those of you in the military should take note. I want to read, but I don't want to read. You read it for yourself. You see how they go about winding their way around, ignoring the wrong that was done in this Comey cabal, and at the same time, what they claim that is important with the sailor. But the sailor didn't get extended the Clinton deal, the Clinton leniency. And it shows in the stories nobody else has. So when you're unaccountable, when you can't be held accountable, how can you justify being silent that these people are in the places they are, doing the things that they do, and continue to do the things that they do? I hear lots of people railing about lots of things, but I don't see anybody kind of even starting to formulate a way to get at the problem. And as long as we don't get at the problem, we're just yakking, we're doing nothing. We're not doing nothing. In the face of this, what might have seemed to be an anomaly, this is what they keep telling us, this is the new normal. Actually, it's not new. It's just being now advanced as a normalcy that was always running, that it was transparent to us. They're not bashful now to throw it in our face, because psychologically, we'll just throw that away and we'll just start ranting about the divisions within us about it, and they know that we're more apt to just be apathetically complainers and whiners. And so throw it out there. This is what I think Snowden's thing was about. Throw it out there, because over time it'll go away. It'll hit the memory hole. It'll go away. They'll all settle back in, and they'll still get in their iPhones, and they're still doing the Internet of Things, and we'll have been there the whole time. And life will go on, and the few that know will die, and those that kind of pop up, if they make too much of a stink, they'll be gone. We'll just make them gone. They got the power now just to drone everybody, and it won't be only by that. You step up and you start making a statement that's contrary to the indoctrination, and it's a dead man tell no tales, and dead women don't either. So don't think that the women are out of this. So the new normal is normalizing what? It's normalizing crime. It makes crime normal. And we sit and we expect it now. And that shouldn't be okay. U.S. war crimes or normalized deviance was another discussion. As we see, again, Clinton was part of this, remember, don't forget Benghazi, all this stuff. Just war criminals. But now it's normalized. It went extrajudicial. It's now normal. The war crimes are now normal. So normal that it's now becoming decisions of the Supreme Court, all decided by bar members. But United States foreign policy establishment and its mainstream media operate with a pervasive set of hypocritical standards that justify war crimes, or what might be called normalization of deviance. And so look at your society, how the deviance is being uplifted, and the cockistocracy, the worst rising to the top to rule you. This is a fact. You can't deny it. Now, I don't know about you, but as it rises to the top, if you're good, you're going to get shoved down. I don't know how much you like floating around in the cesspool, this stinking abyss, but that's up to each one of us to decide. So there's a sociologist that's starting to analyze this. He coined the term normalization of deviance. Or she did, excuse me. And she went through a whole different thing to study the NASA Challenger problem, how deviation was normalized, how it becomes and goes into a system and it becomes like these Excel spreadsheets, all the wrong information. People just look at them. They got thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of code and information. They don't even stop to think that maybe there was an error somewhere. And out later comes the experts say. And pretty soon it leads to a death, a destruction, some sort. I'm suggesting to you, these are the little insights they're telling us is going on. You have to give you the power. What the power is that you get to say, those things they use to prove a thing are a fraud. They haven't proven it. Here's evidence. Just get the link. Here's evidence that anything running an Excel sheet is going to be 20%. It could be up to 20. And I would say you don't know what it is if they can, the Excel machine program can misread coding, words, and constructions. You don't know what the error can be. That you can use that to show that if you can get the open records request to show the data, and if they won't, and then you have a harm, you can use that to go in on them. But if they will show you the Excel spreadsheet, you have another in to go look and see whether that spreadsheet anomalies are creeping in. If it's inside if it's inside the work of the manufacturers that make these things, you just allege that it's 20% error. They say in the article when you read it, they have no fix for it. And so you allege that they use Excel and they have a minimum of 20% error as this study found, and they have to produce for the court their data. So then you get to see it. Because it's not fixable. You just have a discussion about what your cause is supported by, is I guess the point here. They're looking at war crimes. This is, I guess, the point. The highest of the worst is being normalized. And that I hear crickets in the face of, it doesn't have to be that bad. It didn't have to go to war crimes, but there it is. And people are still crickets is a problem I have for some reason. I just have a problem with that. Certainly if we wanted better for ourselves. And this is what, we see the stupidity behind this whole thing. The brazen bully and brute mentality the United States of government has become, I guess, I don't say that in absolutes. They're not bashful not to hide it now. U.S. invades Syria and warns Russia. On Monday, August 22nd, the United States government, which demands the overthrow of internationally recognized as legal government of Syria, officially announced that America's military force in Syria will continue to occupy Syrian land no matter what the Syrian government says, and will shoot down any Syrian planes that fly over U.S. forces there and attack them. If you didn't know, we were in a proxy war. Then it warned Russia, I won't read on more, it warned Russia, don't think you're going to do anything. This is the arrogance of the United States of America. They're not even invited there. They've fabricated this whole thing. And we get into the war crimes normalcy, and you see the world agrees. That makes each one of us seem to me, we're kind of puny in all this, aren't we? But this started from us locally. We didn't keep our people reined in that were supposed to so-called represent us. And so I still feel we have a hand in this. You have to know those that are out in the world claiming a democracy and rule of law and all this aren't doing it because they are high-standard white knights. They're plundering brutes and bullies and criminals. They're psychopaths. They have no regard. They have no regard. And you watch it, you see how Russia's playing this so cool. They bring those principles of regard and care and empathy in, and they are actually winning the day. The bully will not win out. It will have to go to whatever capability it has in violence. And this is our problem, our question. Does it go ultimately, as we were told in Armageddon? You see everything developing. What my uncle explained to me back in the late 60s, early 70s, is now that I couldn't conceive at the time. I'm questioning, in my innocence, I'm saying, well, why would people even go there? Just stay home. No, they don't go there. They didn't stay home. They go there. And you're seeing that today. It's really hard to deny the premonition written in the book. When you see this happening, even despite my innocent lack of awareness of how that could. Here they are. And you see what keeps pressing it is the one that came in that was supposed to be the good guy, or we thought was the good guy, is actually the instigator. And they're psychopaths, they have no conscience, and they have normalized war crimes. And the world is silent before it. Pretty powerful, fascinating, scary stuff at one level. U.S. willing to risk war with Russia to protect Al-Qaeda in Syria is an extension discussion. You get the link. I don't have to. It's just kind of self-evident now. I just want to point out people are now realizing these people are really over the top. You understand? I was telling you that you got Rhino Con Hillary is going to perpetuate this, and the you're going to find ultra-liberal. That wasn't even my discussion. Someone else has identified Trump as ultra-liberal. I told you she was going to be way far left of Hillary when it finally gets into practice. They're not less violent either. In fact, it's already been out of Trump's words that he's willing to continue this, notwithstanding that he will agree to make discussions with Russia, which I think would be good. But that's not the point here. The point is that we're dealing with a bunch of psychopaths in a caucustocracy. Whoever is at the top is the worst of what we as a society have produced. And you might say, that's my opinion. Well, it might be my opinion, but look around you. At some point, the burden has to be flipped onto those that are purporting to be otherwise, when in fact nothing changes. Except your way of life, and not in a good direction. And part of that thing I was telling you that underpins all this normal seed of war crimes is that Title 50. I tell you that's the Trading with the Enemy Act. Citizens of the United States in 33 was removed from the exception in 1917. That made all enemy combatants then. They just kind of built on that. They never repealed the war powers on that act at all. They repealed about everyone else, and then you have the hidden wars in our face, like the war on drugs and war on this, war on that. But the main one is the commerce war. So we have a financial construct. I've told you, Title 50. Go to the appendix. You'll see both the 1917 Trading with the Enemy Act and the section of Chapter 1295A, which is the financial construct that the military power of the United States protects globally. And there was a little discussion about, I was talking to you about, watch out, be careful on what they bring in for gold-backed stuff, and watch out this new digital currency, and they're going to get rid of the go to the cashless society type thing. A little discussion came on here, which I found was interesting in the discussion of the authors. The sentiment of the author would be mine. He's identifying the fraud in all this, but what the people who are the authors are like, I found Hernando de Soto. They tell you what the reality condition is. Notwithstanding how wrong it might be, that's what they're pushing. That's the understanding of the experts and the consensus and how the movers and shakers move and shake. They shake you out of a lifestyle, but that's notwithstanding, that's not what, you're not important. But this little thing was kind of interesting. I just want to read a few passages. In the authority here discussing, the authors admit in this discussion that gold shouldn't be of backing currency. He says, too many, I think it was insightful about what it gives the government and why we have to go the other way, I guess is the point, as the author would suggest himself. That I don't want to read through the story, but these authors of the experts would say and admit, to many people, the fact that the government does not back the currency with anything tangible seems implausible and secure. But the decision not to back the currency with anything tangible was made for a very good reason. And the interjection of the author here is, yes, and we know what that reason was, so that the state and central banksters could have a ready and unlimited access to the creation of money to solidify and expand their power. Well, it's not really money they're expanding, be careful here, but we know that there was an ulterior motive. The very good reason was the displacement of the power to decide from the people in the representative government to foreigners in international places. And the authors continue, however, to think differently. This is, again, the reality in the world that we're living, and we can disregard it. We can have opinion against it, but if we disregard it, we don't figure out that that is an authority that needs to be defeated and defeat it, it's going to defeat us through our use of opinion and not action. But the authors continue to say, if the government backed the currency with something tangible like gold, then the supply of money would vary with how much much gold was available. But not backing the currency, by not backing the currency, the government avoids this constraint and indeed receives a key freedom: the ability to provide as much or as little money as needed to maintain the value of money and to best suit the economic needs of the country. This word country is not talking about your country. It's talking about them in control of your country. And so this removal of a standard which the Constitution allowed to the states and weight and measure to be coin, weight and measure, and certain material, it allowed the government of freedom to decide what was good for the government as an economic consideration, not a wealth consideration, but an economic consideration in the control of how much you will or will not get. Which I read, there's more to read here. There's more and more and more. I think I want to stop there. That I just wanted to point out, here's another author, a contrary view of the authors that are government or system oriented, telling you how it is and what this lack of foundation in the money system does for the people wielding the seats of decision in the government. That if you don't take this as a clue of what has to be changed and change your actions in your reality, your real world time right now, and we move intentionally from this nonsense, it's made up puff and smoke, as they used to call it, or still call it, that we don't make an independent preparation, and I would say we can step back into those things that they have not monetized. They have removed the tangible constraint. Then you're also not taking that benefit, are you, of that intangible non-constraint that they control. You are going to be better protected in the future as we move this thing along, whether or not they go completely, nuke on us. I don't know. I mean, nuke in the Middle East. I mean, economically nuke. They say that it's coming here. There are a lot of people, the trendsetters here, are telling us that something's up. I've been amazed at how much they can float this balloon, but so that's neither here nor there. We have to be cognizant of when we allowed the key of freedom to the government, it was going to work for its needs, and those in the seats of decision work for its needs and not yours. That if you want any measure of control, you're going to have to pick an alternative to what they're doing. And I just saw that as this statement here, this little link, discussion, as another proof of that fact. And so here where they got you the silent weapons, quiet wars, they get you plugged into the Internet of Things, your whole life's going to be cashless. See, the Constitution says make weight and measure of silver and gold, coin, for whatever the convenience level would be. They try to make the coins inconvenient, but you're talking about your freedom from the key, the unleashing of a beast upon you when you do this other controlled thing that may fluctuate. Remember, it only fluctuates with the commodity values of everything, and it's supreme. It's not like they can't fix it like they are now. Well, they could if you believed in that system, but the point is that the commodities will all be relative. So that's why it becomes important and why it has been that way for history. But you go ahead and go to Silent Weapons, Quiet Wars, get the Internet of Things, plug into all this. Anonymous takes 9 central banks offline, unleashes massive assault on the, quote, the global banking cartel. Now, I went through reading this. This is where I have a lot of problem with Anonymous. I don't know what it is, what's parts integrated, what's not. Is a disintegrated operation, but I think it's a cover for an integrated operation called Anonymous. And when you see what they went after, I just had a big old problem. They say they're going after the global banking cartel as a headline. In fact, they didn't. They went after the Central Bank of Greece and over at Cyprus and some other minor banks. And I'm thinking, why are you, and the Dominican Republic, why are you going after the places that are already beat down if you're anonymous and agreeing that you're going to stand the people up? Why not go after the World Bank, the IMF, the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, go after the Fed? I mean, if you're going to do something, go after the global cartel. Go to the subsection, the thing that support, the system that supports the puff and smoke. The ones that make the derivatives. Go after that. No, they go after the Bank of Greece. Can't even hardly hold it together. They can't hold it together, but they're sunk. All right? The people haven't removed themselves. Not quite. They tried to. We heard little stories about that. But it's writing on the wall here is what I say. There's evidence and notice to you that whatever Anonymous is, it's not going to make the right decision. If the attack was agreed that we should go after the usurpers of the world, and it's in this fictional puff and smoke fiat system, and that's who we have to attack, and we have to get back to weight and measure, why don't you go after the people that are making those decisions, not the loose strings that are barely able to keep attached to the main body, the main mothership? Shows you we got a big psyop going on here about all this. This is I guess people rally up around it. I found this an insult. Even if it's not, if this is a story, if this is how we respond as people, we're done, folks. We're just done. I don't know what else to say. We're done. And so, this is also the problem of chaos running in the world without a plan, an actual plan that would actually help the people in mass. So anyway, be careful. You can be attacked. This whole digital thing is not provably secure. Just the fact that there's these zero-day exploits at all should have you really be wondering what's going on. I'm asking you all, I don't know how they do this thing. I don't know if it ever works. If you establish an independent weight and measure money system amongst the people that you know and mesh these networks of people out, you're going to be far less susceptible to the plunder. In fact, if I remember reading a documentation in Oregon at the time of the Depression in Jacksonville, where people could go down to the river every day and get their gold. They could get their gold every day, go to the store, get their food, that they really didn't feel the Depression. Men were working. They did it honorably. They did it. They created the wealth. The stores took the gold in trade for food. Families could exist. It was pretty much the countryside, the people of the countryside living off the countryside. But they didn't feel the brunt of the Depression like everywhere else did. They had an independent source of a money system. And it happened to be gold flake or gold nuggets or whatever they did. So, little evidences of us, if we want to be prepared, we are having to go back to the future, if you will, as this thing we get drug along without the power to be the people that we need to be, and we are tending to be more crickets. The power's not in the crickets, folks. They never said that. I've never seen that anywhere, that the power was in the crickets. Now, anybody that has a proof, a counterproof, markonthebeast@yahoo.com. And here's the seeds are being dropped for this changeover to this digital, hackable, anonymously chaotic attack in the weakest parts of the society, not the strongest. A Harvard professor creates blueprint for ending cash in the U.S. calls for immediate phasing out of the $20 bill. And then it goes on to talk about they're going to phase out the hundreds because the drug dealers are using those to move their money around and want to make it more inconvenient for them to do that. Apparently $1 million, $100 bills weighs about 22 pounds. If they got rid of the 100, they'll make it a lot more hard to move that money around, is the reason for getting rid of cash in the United States. Cash is the earmark of, as even fiat is the earmark of anonymity, isn't it? So even the fiat has a purpose, if you want to look at it that way. If it wasn't plundered, I don't know that I'd have such a big problem with it. If it was based in something more than a plunder of what advantage we can take in the world, I don't know that I'd have to relook at that. But paper currency, the fiat, is anonymity. They want to get rid of that. They blame it on the very thing the government itself has created, the war on drugs. We see what happens when you legalize. No, I'm not saying you legalize the worst of it, but you legalize marijuana, all of a sudden the government creates taxes. There's no war on it anymore. They don't have this problem. Now they got a problem. They're flush with cash. It's not because of the drug dealers. It's because now the government won't allow their banks to receive this cash. The government's in the way again. Why? Because they want to get rid of this stuff. It was an interim means to get you to this cashless society. It was an interim way to move you from from wealth to economy, from understanding generations of memory loss of where the wealth came from and where the wealth comes from. It's your endeavor to develop and extract from nature that which nature offers us. Now I'm back into what? Land disposal as it's supposed to be in the United States, as evidence in the mining law that shows there's patents available. It wasn't the first disposal law, folks. There was I think the Homestead Act was maybe 1862 or something. There was an act of 1820. I don't remember now the name of that act. Lots of patents are under 1820. The mining law wasn't the original, but it was the one I can get a hold of and understand that it speaks to all of them as well. That in the country United States there was land disposal under an obligation and duty for the government to do so, to put the people in the proper place, not make them service bound, a debt bound, but to make them give them the potential, and securely so, to develop the natural resources for wealth generation, and the reciprocal secondary, tertiary, so-called economy that develops around wealth development. That were moved from the economy they can mess with to yours that they can't, that creates wealth. They have to mess with that. And now we're to the point, I do have some time. I'm not going to go through a lot of it. I can't do it because we are in some trouble. We need, all the things I tell you. I try not to talk too many tactics and strategies and reasons and developments when we are up against a serious point. We don't promote, and this is, I'm edging closer to do that, to talk about this, but I have to tell you all folks, we're in some trouble, and the Bar Association and this facade just us system has now they've crossed the red line, I guess I can say. Even Oregon, let's talk about the Supreme Court of California. Even Oregon didn't do it, where the 13-year-old, pumped up by some environmental terrorist, attempted to advance that as a 13-year-old, the future generations were going to be harmed, where they didn't allow an environmental imposition on the use of water or something, and they tried to install the public trust doctrine, which I talked about. And the public trust doctrine is that doctrine that they'll relate back to, which is within the police power of the state. Again, very powerful position. You're talking at the highest levels of law here when we get into this stuff. You have to understand that the state has absolute power here underneath these public trust doctrine to protect those areas underneath the doctrine, which have always been and limited to the navigable rivers in the public trust doctrine. That these new age and new environmental terrorists, as young as 13 years old, getting into the appellate courts of Oregon, said, we want you to expand the public trust doctrine over all the land. And Oregon wasn't even bold enough to extend that over beyond navigable rivers, as I reported on that, and they took that little girl's complaint and reversed it and sent it packing like it was supposed to. That day has now changed. And I guess the public trust doctrine, folks, is being adjusted to become nature's trust. It was a professor, University of Oregon, I think she is, Mary Woods. She's the guru of this and the advancer of all things unholy versus with respect to the Republican form of representative government and law and order and peace and settlement and expectation of peace and settlement and remedy. So this is where I was wondering. I was really surprised that the courts did not actually go there quite yet. So I said, okay, there's still some pressure to not extend this fabricated trust condition underneath the police powers to the state to implement universally. Well, that day has ended, folks. California, we have a decision out of California called what we've been calling the Reinhardt case. I will not discuss too much. I'll just read. Essentially, I'll tell you a little bit of setup. I'm just going to read the first page of this order. I'm going to tell you in the first page there's about 3 or 4 answers as to how it's invalid, it's void. But you will never get that discussed by anybody else, probably ever. They won't understand how to do that. I may give you one example just to show you how this works. That we have a void order that is going to change your life. It's an interference on the grants of Congress, and they could care less about how they're wrongly implementing everything. And so I just want to read this to you because I think it's important to those that are that will be listening to me that are minors or interested in land disposal, trying to get a handle on how this works, the importance of it, and what the Bar Association, as we sued to enjoin in Oregon, which is interesting, why the district and mining district goes over 4 states, was that we can now have standing to address this. Was set up back in 2011. Again, you have to really think ahead of what you're going to need, the tools you're going to need, is now come to fruition, which is why we have now a lot of work to do. This has now created a ton of work in discussing what's the best remedy against the Supreme Court of California's decision to eliminate the grant acts of Congress, essentially, and put them underneath the police powers of the state of California. Very tricky how they did it, but it's all wrong. And so you have to know about the foundation to know and see that. And I know I don't know how many people, when I say it's all wrong, you say, well, who am I against the Supreme Court of California? I guess that's a fair enough question, but I told you, folks, I'm a party to a default judgment victory where we outed this very condition. They even used the words in here that we said are a usurpation of your way of life. They use the words of sustainable development, if you know what you're looking for, right in this decision. They expand police powers beyond and misinterpret how it's applied, just like they would have, and more importantly, how I predicted this case would go when I first heard about it. They went there. They went to where they had to go. As I've said, these disposal laws are so powerful, they're treaty level. In other words, you got the ratification by the Congress in the act of Congress in creating the patent, the agreement of the legislature to do so, and the concurrence and ratification when the president signs the patent is an administrative. So there's 3 types of treaties. It's an administrative treaty, the name of which I don't remember now, but there's 3. It's not just the treaties that are ratified by the Senate. There's 2 others. And so these are treaty-level documents that the state of California believes it can use a police power action to diminish and completely prohibit, is the point. Reinhardt is a case where there was a miner who was, I will just say my opinion this way, incompetently and wrongly advised to file a plan of operations and or a notice of intent with the Forest Service. And I say that because the law is clear. There's no way a miner has the authority to do that in the law. There's just no provision for it. The miner does. He's coerced into doing it. He doesn't know what the answer is. None of the guys I know that mine have ever had to file one, and we have the right answer. Just like I've talked to you about the 3809s, it's the same beast on the other side for the BLM. There's no authority. But this guy files this notice of intent underneath the same attorney that's now driving the defense against a charge that the state of California brought against the miner. Complete incompetence in the mining law, complete incompetence in the knowledge of the mining law, in walking into a buzzsaw political agenda. It was the power of this grant is such that they had to go to police powers. I predicted it, and they went the way I predicted months and months, a year ago, I think. And they also did it on the back of wrongly advanced positions and a judiciary that did not do its duties to make sure every step was fulfilled to protect the grantee the state of California has the obligation and duty to protect under its obligations, and the agreement that the United States Congress would do what it did. It makes that a question. I'll read the first page and then I'll point out some at least one thing, and then we'll move on. I want you to know about this. This is a serious problem. The red line has been crossed. We're working now to see how do we address this. You're surrounded by the enemy. They're in the seats of decision. What do we do? We've already defeated them once. How do we get at them? You know that's not going to happen again. What do we bring, folks? What's the remedy now? It's very serious what this is. In the Supreme Court of California, this is the case of Brandon Reinhart versus the people. All in capitals. Let's not go there. All you people that know about this stuff, just kind of let's move past. That's the lesser of the thing. But I want to remind you, right on the top of the caption, I understood the answer right here in the Supreme Court of California. That's one answer. I'll leave that for a moment. There's an answer as to what the problem with this whole thing is. But California, listen very carefully for those of you you legal beagles, listening for what you have to listen for. This decision starts this way, and I need to ask you, for those so that you know where I'm going, what's missing? What ought to have been the first paragraph? But here's how they start, and I'll read the first page or so. California was shaped by the search for gold. In time, the state's other national treasures, its waters and wildlife, its forests and coastlines, proved similar draws. We consider here a conflict arising from the competing desires to exploit and to preserve these various resources. The people assert the state may, in pursuit of protecting fish habitats and quality of the state's waterways, temporarily ban a particular method of gold mining pending adoption of suitable regulations. Defendant Brandon Lance Reinhart, convicted of engaging in the banned mining technique, asserts it is the only practicable method, and federal law promoting mining on federal land preempts states' contrary legislation. The Court of Appeal concluded Reinhart potentially was correct and remanded for consideration of additional evidence and argument. We granted the people's petition for review. We conclude the state's moratorium is not preempted. The federal laws Reinhart relies upon, let me repeat the limitation. The federal laws Reinhart relies upon reflect a congressional intent to afford prospectors secure possession of, and in some instances, title to, the places they mine. But while Congress sought to protect miners' real property interests, it did not go further and guarantee them the right to mine immune from exercises of the state's police powers. We reversed the Court of Appeals. That's the first page and a paragraph on the top of the second page. I hope all you legal beagles listening kind of picked it up, because it would warm my heart to know you're really understanding what I've been talking about jurisdiction, authorities. And when I asked you what's missing, folks, what was missing there? What was missing in the first page? And that relates to my initial look on the very first line. I said that the answer here is in the Supreme Court of California, first of all. But also notice the limitation. And this is a violation not only on the bar member who positioned this, the bar members that attacked it or defended it, and the bar member judiciary that did not seek deeper. That they say the federal laws Reinhart relies upon was a limitation on the case and an encroachment of the grant itself, because whether Reinhart relied on anything, the state of California was obligated to find what the law was in this, not invent something. You see the limitation that the lawyers, I keep telling you, the lawyers only promote certain things, and if they don't promote the right thing, the court will not, like they used to. I used to read court cases. They will not bring in the correct thing that ought to have been done. Let me get to the point I already said, such as the independent judiciary, as it wants to purport itself to be, looking into the case and finding out this case started with a document issued by the minor who was ill-advised in the law and did not have to file that, which has no standing in law, which allowed the government to do what it did to him. The Supreme Court was required under its obligation to do justice to find that fact in the first instance. But let me get to before all of that. What have I talked to you about? Challenging the authorities and the jurisdictions and improperly filing your case in jurisdictions that aren't competent. You know, the extent, the condition of that grant that was issued by Congress is not within the judicial purview of any state's judiciary. That when I read that this case was in the Supreme Court of California deciding the scope of that grant, that this court has no jurisdiction on this whole matter. Did you catch that, folks? To back that up, did you catch the first paragraph? Never explains how this court has jurisdiction over the subject matter or that it is competent to interpret this grant, regardless of what laws have been relied upon. The first page of this, folks, tells me this is a fraudulent decision. This is a color of law imposition on a grant that the state of California has no authority to decide. It, on its face, is a felony, theft by extortion. And for those of you that have been following me and going and reading these words that I'm telling you, you would have to be shaking your head up and down right now in concurrence. This thing gets worse. I don't want to go on and on. But you notice they said the state's waterways. Folks, the state doesn't actually have any waterways that are not navigable. Everything with a property that's not navigable, the property underlying, remember I've talked about all this. It's owned by the private property owners or to wherever their limit is declared in their patent or in the subsequent documentation. They've extended the public trust doctrine over all California waterways when it's only applicable lawfully to navigable rivers. Those commercial places, which are nonetheless highways to be free. Yet the minerals were reserved. So now we have the only contention the state has is the miner in any particular instance doing it without interfering with the free access to it. Anyway, they threw on, again, fish habitat is an amenity. No value. But this is the words of the environmental terrorists sitting in the seat of decision in California. When they went to where they went, folks, they went over the red line. I have not heard of many people that even want to address any of these things, let alone all the rest that's in here. It goes on and on. I just read almost back down to the sentence. Let me give you a hint here. There's so much here but remember they said here that you have the right of possession, and they limited their view on the possession, and they talked about the state. Let me go read the mining law to you. It says pretty clearly in part of it. Let me go to 30 U.S.C. 26. That the law says, and I'm part of the way through it, it identifies the public domain and the heirs and assigns, and the law of 1872, which incorporated and amended the 1870, it was an amendment of and enlarged the 1870 and the 1866 Act that comes to the point that says the same thing in all the acts. So long as they comply, that these, let me just read the locators of a mining location made on any mineral vein, lode, or ledge situated on the public domain, their heirs and assigns, where no adverse claim existed on the 10th day of 1872, so long as they comply with the laws of the United States and with state, territorial, and local regulations not in conflict with the laws of the United States governing their possessory title. Now remember, we're at the possessory title. That's where the decision stops. It says, it extended some possessory title stuff, but didn't say we couldn't impose a police power. Listen to the rest of this. That locator shall have exclusive right of possession and enjoyment of all the surface included within the lines of their locations. But let me go back to the conjunctive and. This is not separable. It's possession and enjoyment. California treats this as if it's just a possessory thing, that you have literally no right of enjoyment. So much so limited is this right of possession that the state's police power can be used to tell you that you cannot use the land and enjoy it. That Supreme Court case can't even follow this simple little statement. Defers to the title, which the state has made regulations over, consistent with the mining law, consistent with the will and needs of Congress, and its obligations and duties under another act which I won't mention. And I'm not mentioning some of these things. I've not mentioned a whole lot yet. I don't want people that listen to me that think they know what's going on, that fight me all the time out in the public sector, to make more noise around this. This is a very serious time. I'm not going to advance too much. I'm just going to point out for y'all how you can read some of this, and we go tear right through this. One instance of which is the statement in the law that the bar members will always do, and they truncate the law for their own purposes. It clearly says we have a right of enjoyment. Well, the enjoyment was what? The enjoyment was to the development and extraction of minerals, which is what? A national security and national defense consideration. If you want to understand how high the level of this problem is, this judiciary just went after and attacked the United States in a critical place for its mineral production. One of the reasons for the grant and why you have possession and enjoyment. It's not just kicking back with a beer and a smoke. Although there might be some of that going on, that's not relative to the grant. How you get there is not relative to what the purpose was. It was the enjoyment was to develop and extract. And pertinent that extraction was an economic extraction. So, I think I'm going to say enough there. This thing gets a whole lot deeper, but the problem is the deeper goes into where the wrongness is that people who contend against me will create noise and in people that become as much of a problem to deal with than I choose to deal with right now. I don't know that there's going to be many people that understand this than the people that I work with. I'm not quite sure what we're going to decide to do. I'm pointing out to you that the Bar Association in this country and the political parties have set up, you can even see in this court case, and you'll have a link, they've set it up, I told you to set a record, folks. I've explained how the importance of setting a record. Well, the government does it through the legislative process. It set up a record that the legislature so-called found and the judiciary, the legislature is the Bar Association member or the political party member who has admitted in our case that they will usurp the laws of your government, either state or federal, to advance what the Bar Association says is a foreign imposition to undermine your way of life. That they set the record through the legislature on presumptions of right, and the judiciary used that record to defeat Congress. On its face, that's invalid. But this is what they think they're doing. That they're going to get away with it. Why? Because wherever it's appropriate, if we can't as people stand up and get together and properly address this, we will not overthrow this insurrection. As I've told you, they only read short of what they need, then they go and they say you don't have the right. Here it says possession and enjoyment is not a small thing. It is the whole and the entirety of the matter. Why? This grant of the minerals and the use is such a high level, they had to lie. Not even police powers that they brought to bear on this are sufficient to defeat this grant. And I don't know of many people that understand that or can articulate that point. That it has been usurped. See, there's a presumption now that this is the law. And we already see it. It's going to emanate to every state right now. So those of you that have been listening and biding your time, this is it. If you have any inkling about protecting yourself as a miner or a property owner, as a rancher, anything, this decision sets the basis for telling you you don't have a right to use your land, the land granted to you by act of Congress. And they had to go to police powers to try and do it, and I was kind of excited because they didn't do it, folks. I'm looking, is that all you got? You brought the police powers and then lied about it? That's a pretty powerful position for us if we would just take it on, folks. I get kind of excited about that part. I don't like doing all this. But if we're in a battle, and we're in that battle, we are, whether we want to agree to it or not, there are such glaring failures of law that everyone wants to deny as well. There's glaring failures of law that the enemy is putting against us. Remember, they make their own statement in their conversation that what they do is a warning. They caution their people. This is a warning. What we do is non-constitutional. It's adjunct policy. When this is the best they can do in a situation of a war power, which I found out through the necessary and proper clause, it explained a whole lot. I was trying to go through about another thing that's going on. We're defending against the reacquisition of the federal government on any of these lands. We're finding out what they think the power is and how it's failing actually. The necessary and proper clause, why it's so expansive, is actually a war power. It's now adopted as a war power. I just found this out. Didn't actually understand that. I understood that it was doing that, but I didn't understand really that it was someone else had made that finding. Again, outside of my beliefs. That if they can't come, even though the necessary and proper clause, which would have been defeated, and are war powers, can only be defeated by the state government by imposing a police power that's underneath the war powers, that is a lie. They have nothing against land disposal, folks, just as I've been trying to tell y'all. The problem is we're not in the final seat of decision, and we're infiltrated and surrounded, and we have a bunch of people who are the recipients and patent of those land disposals, even though the ones that everywhere else that can't find them don't think they exist. They all exist. They're everywhere. You can find them if you know where to look. If you have a piece of land, there's a patent already issued behind it. This is not even a question. That they cannot be defeated, and the only way they were defeated is by the felony committed by the Supreme Court in disregarding the treaty-level power and wrongly imposing a police power. You understand, when they imposed a police power on one miner's work over the use of water, they actually inverted the purpose. Police power is not done that way. Police power is like a conflagration. When it gets so big, it becomes a police power for the state to step in to stop it. It's one activity that affects everybody, not a miner sucking up gravel in one little bitty river somewhere. You see what they've done and expanded this to be. Why? Because they took this public trust doctrine and they put it as a wet blanket over California. To kill wealth. That's the point I wanted to get back to. To kill real wealth. If people in the Depression could go to the river and get gold to buy their food, they weren't affected. If you can go to the river to get your gold, folks, you're not affected. Now they have a law that violated all of that, so that when you go to the river, you're going to be put in the pokey, so that they now tax the taxpayer more to keep you as a criminal. You have to understand they criminalized a grant act of Congress. If you don't think we went lawless, here's more example. You don't understand the dynamic that's going on here. We're in a very terrible way here. I'm encouraged, but I mean, I guess this is a different way to look at it. It's not a woe. We're in a battle anyway. When you finally get it, however your excuse about all of it, you're in a battle. You have to fight. It's not our choice not to fight. If you don't fight, the one who has the plan wins. When you finally understand that, you have to do something. As small as it might seem, you have to do something to be the objection. You start producing the lack of consent that they're claiming that they take by consensus. You make that a public record in all sectors of our society by all peoples of our society. It becomes almost impossible for them to legitimize what they're doing on top of it. But you at least become part of the pushback without excuse. That this case has all the, and we're just seeing it behind the scenes. The state representatives, again, people that have agreed that they commit treason against you, are attempting to pick this up. They're picking it up at this point. We are advancing to them. They'll be felons when they do so. And just to let you all know, in Oregon, if you just stay close to Jefferson Mining District and you go read some of the things about water use on there, there's an answer against that decision that shows that the decision's 180 degrees out of what Oregon has determined a long time ago over the same subject matter. It's so easy to find now. I can just prove it by the distinction between two states that are supposed to be sovereign and independent, but can't be with respect to this mineral estate. So I've said a whole lot, probably a lot more than I was thinking, but it's not on the critical strategic things. I don't want to mention too much about that. There's more reasons why this is all wrong. But I wanted to at least get that on the record for you all that are really listening and taking down notes. We are in a thing we have to fight. There's a way to fight it. It's methodical. It's foundational. If you have no foundation, forget it. You got to get your foundation. Forget your method if you don't have a foundation. It's immediate. When you get the foundation, the response is immediate to this stuff. You start to lighten the load. When I was able to see that the state of California made a decision and did not submit to the record by the decision itself, facially, how they could make this decision, that decision's void on its face, I don't really have to read the rest. And when you start to get to that point, I did read some of the rest, not all of it, just the points where I wanted to do some trains of thought of how they are the most powerful wrongs I pulled out. That you don't have to work so hard to keep up. Once you find them make a problem in the very first sentence, why go on? Just send it back. Send the fatal error back. Don't even engage the rest. It's how you deal with this. Otherwise, I could not before, until I figured this out. They want you engaged in the minutia. They present minutia. They make money by the word. Your job is to limit all that minutia down to what needs to be said and limit your words so you don't get off the point and they can't get you off the point. And it sounds like a lot here what I'm saying. What I've been saying is really just some line item bullet points on a piece of paper to delineate. But for y'all that are listening and coming and on the uptake and trying to figure out what I say, make heads or tails of whether or not it's worth it or that it's workable. It sounds like maybe like a different foreign language itself. It was a language we should have never not had, is the problem. That's our first problem. When you recognize that, it means that the burden's on you more to start getting it, because once you do, the load does become a lot lighter. It's still there, but this enemy is not that sharp about it. They're only smart, not intelligent. They have overwhelmed us, but that's because they kept the blinders on you and me. I'm not immune to any of this. I just had to focus on it. So, I guess that's enough for today. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Hope you learned something about it. Hope that you can take what I do and put it in your own life in the way you need it to do. Go after the wrong you find needs to be made right, however small. It's amazing about that point. Thank you, Grimner, for your time and your website, the ability to put the blogcaster in the archives, and Bodidi and you for Freedom's Network, and Grammy Mary for the Spreaker, for all y'all on Spreaker. Shout out to Mary, and UCY.TV for simulcasting. If any other simulcasting networks have a 2-hour slot doing replays or something on their network, if you can contact them and say, hey, why don't you listen in and maybe simulcast this broadcast live on your network. We do this every week. We do that every week. And to the terrestrial broadcasters that are here, there, and going on, thank you very much for what you do just to get the word out on people who have radio. And again, I can't encourage you enough. For as dire as it's looking, I think the worst is actually the silver lining for us. So take care. I'll be here next week. Tech diffs and nature willing. Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
That's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.
The anti